No, you're totally fine. I'm Brittany. Nice to meet you. Oh, nice. Well, no, I haven't. Well, maybe. I've met a lot of people. So I'm the midwife for Amber. She's doing good. She's hanging in there. Yep. Yeah, I think it'll be good. We're just waiting for, it to do its thing. It's a waiting game. Hey to everybody who's already here. I'm going to give it a few more minutes to give people some time to get logged in. If you are already here, can you please type in the chat your name and your chapter, because that is how we will take attendance.
Hi, is it okay that two of us are joining off one computer? We like tried to put our name together.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Okay.
fine. Just make sure you type both of your names separately in the chat so that I have that there. We'll give it just a couple more minutes and then we'll get going. I think most of you are here. Maybe not. There's just a lot of you guys from Alpha Phi tonight. I mean, I'm here for it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And if I see people coming in as we're going, we will remind them to type their names in there. All right, give me just a second. Let me pull up the presentation. Hold on. Zoom's not cooperating. Let me just a second. All right, let's try this. Okay, can everybody see this presentation screen? Okay, perfect. If you can't, holler, say something. All right, well, welcome. I'm sure most of you know my face already, but just in case you don't, I am Brittany Thornton, and I'm currently now the interim managing director for Omega Phi Alpha. So I'm going to be giving tonight's presentation on serving with cultural humility. So I'm glad that you're all here, and hopefully this won't be, hopefully some of this you already know, and ideally some of it you don't know, so that it doesn't, bore you to death. So please, if you need something, just like raise your hand, um, send something in the chat, and hopefully I will see it pop up on my screen. So let's get going. So today we're doing Serving with Cultural Humility, Enhancing Your Chapter's Service Initiatives. So the first thing is, what is cultural humility? So the definition is a lifelong process of self-reflection and self-critique, recognizing power imbalances in relationships and fostering respectful engagement with diverse communities. So we're going to continually be seeking, self-reflecting and challenging those power imbalances that we see, especially when we're serving these different diverse communities. And as it says in that last bullet point, the focus is really going to be on respect and accountability for ourselves. So first, let's talk a little bit about cultural competence versus cultural humility. So I'm going to start with something that's not on the screen, and that is the similarities between the two. So some of the similarities, and there's many more than this, but some of them is going to be understanding diverse cultural backgrounds. That's literally what we're doing with both of these things. Respectful communication across cultures, awareness of our own personal biases, a willingness to learn and adapt, and then engaging with individuals as individuals and not as like preconceived notions or stereotypes. So those are some of the similarities that both of these have. So now let's talk about kind of what's the difference between each of them. So we're going to start with cultural competence, which is here on the left. And I've just done like as you can see, 3 kind of quick bullet points on the differences. So cultural competence, this is going to be more knowledge focused. It's going to be about acquiring that knowledge, whereas cultural humility is going to take it even further by acknowledging that we're never going to fully understand someone else's experience. Cultural competence is going to have more of a defined endpoint. It's sort of like, oh, I want to learn more about X culture, so I'm going to do some research and read some books and get this idea, have this knowledge, as the last bullet point says, get this mastery of these cultural facts about this culture. Whereas on the other hand, cultural humility is going to embrace this learning mindset and recognize that this is a lifelong process. It's not something that has an end date, right? We're constantly going to be keeping our minds open to learning new things as we have new interactions and engagement, as we have new experiences with people of these different cultures and things like that. And it's going to recognize that limitation in understanding. So like we said before in the last slide, that knowing that we can never fully understand everything there is to understand about another person's experience, right? So these are some of the differences and the similarity. Oh, sorry about that. And we're done. That's it. Just kidding. I pushed the wrong button. Okay. Um, so why does cultural humility even matter? Why are we talking about it? Why are we here? So, especially in regards to service, because obviously that's how we're kind of coming at this here. So, cultural humility is going to ensure that we don't make assumptions about what various communities need, right? So, I am not going to go in as a white person and work with a community that's primarily, persons of color and think I know all there is to know about what we're doing here because clearly I don't. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to hold on. Somebody said that the screens are not for them, the slides are not full screen and the screen looks frozen. Is anyone else having this problem?
For us,
Or
we
can
can't
you
see the
guys,
screen at all.
you can't see the screen. You could before, but you can't now?
Yes, we can't now though.
Okay, hold on. Technical difficulties. Please stand by. Let me stop the share. Okay, let me try this again. I'm going to try it again. Let's see if this fixes the problem or not. What about now?
Yeah, we could see now.
You can see it now? Okay. All right, let me know if that happens again. Okay, so instead what I was saying is we're going to work alongside these communities to co-create these solutions that respect their values and respect their culture. And this is what is ultimately going to help build trust and improve the overall impact of our efforts. If they don't trust us, then and this is in any scenario, if someone doesn't trust us that we're trying to help and we're trying to assist, one, that initial act of service is not going to be as successful as it can be. But additionally, they're not going, if we leave that and they're like, man, that was terrible. They don't know what they're talking about. We don't trust them. They're never going to ask us back. They're never going to allow us to come back. And that may even close them off to other, you know, groups or people who are trying to help them because now they're just like, well, we don't want to deal with anybody if this is, how it goes. So we certainly don't want to do that. So as an example, a personal example that may or may not resonate with you guys is, so my main job is I am a midwife. And there is a lot of midwifery work that is done in all over the place, but in Haiti specifically. And I had noticed years ago that unfortunately, many of the groups that go to Haiti to help with like midwifery related things, they kind of just come in, as unfortunately we tend to do as white people, and they kind of come in and they're like, oh, we'll help you deliver all your babies and we'll open a birth center and we'll do all these things. And that's great or can be great. But the ones that are the most effective and that have always lasted long term and that the community really enjoys and embraces are the groups that they go in and they don't just say, we're going to help deliver your babies and we're going to set up this birth center. What they do is they say, we're going to come in and we're going to train you. We're going to train your people to be midwives because no one's going to know how to take care of your people and their babies the way that you are going to, right? And so instead of coming in and just sort of not being responsive to their needs, and that kind of with that kind of comes some of that like savior complex, right? Of like, you just want to do good. And it can be a very fine line between genuinely just wanting to help and do anything you can to help. But also we have to sometimes step back and be like, are we potentially doing more harm than good in this situation? So principles, real quick, is everybody seeing the screen change? Anybody just give me a yes or a no? Um, So I'm just gonna keep going unless you tell me otherwise. So, whoops, if I can do my job correctly. So principles of cultural humility. So there's three key principles when it comes to cultural humility. First is going to be self-reflection. And what this is going to do is this is going to allow us to examine our own biases and recognize where we might usually unintentionally impose them. So most of the time, we give people the benefit of the doubt, right? Usually we're not coming in and saying, like, I'm just going to come in and impose all my biases on these people. It's typically unintentional, right? But that almost makes it more difficult because that's going to take a much more conscious effort on our part to recognize that and to work to not do that. Secondly, we have to be aware of power imbalances and power dynamics, ensuring that we're not taking over the decision-making process. So again, I don't want to come in and think I know everything there is to know. Maybe I've done this type of project before with other communities or with my own community. That doesn't mean that I can come in and just say, well, I know everything there is to know about this. This is how we've always done it. This is how it's always worked. So this is how we're going to do it here. We have to really not only listen to any feedback that's being given from these communities, but hear it and implement it, right? It's not enough just to listen to it and then say, okay, great, thanks so much, I appreciate it, and then just kind of go about your way and ignore what they have to say. So, hold on, got an error on my end now. There we go. So, okay, so self-reflection. So how do we examine these biases and this privilege that we may have, again, conscientiously or not? So self-reflection is really going to be at the core of cultural humility. It's going to involve constantly asking ourselves important questions about the assumptions that we're making and the privilege that we hold. So some of the examples right here on the screen is simply saying, what assumptions am I making? What and you have to kind of dig deep sometimes, and you have to be willing to kind of set your ego aside, um, because we can kind of get offended pretty easily, even from ourselves, right? Um, so, and also the how my privilege shape my perspective. So these are hard questions, or they can be hard questions, and it can be really easy to be like, oh, I don't have any assumptions, and I'm not letting my privilege shape my perspective. And I think if that is your initial answer, it's not to say that it's wrong, because maybe you really have done the work. But if that's your initial answer, then I strongly recommend that you take a second look before moving forward, just to make sure, if that makes sense. So just kind of asking that and being very real with yourself. You don't have to voice this necessarily, and but that's not always a bad thing either. So some of the methods, really quick, let's kind of jump for a second, is obviously you can do journaling. That's going to be the most private, I guess, way that you could do this, would be to like journal these things, write down anything that comes to your mind, do like a word association. I mean, get real with yourself. For example, let's say you're going out and you're working with like a primarily African American and Black community. If you're going to do some journaling, write down, African American or Black or both or whatever, and write down any words that come to your head about that, because that could be a way where we kind of find, you write something and then you go back and you look at it and you're like, oh, maybe I do have like either some stereotypes or some biases or whatever that's kind of coming out. I'm not saying it's going to be something terrible, hopefully, but that's the whole point of this, right? Is to dig deep and examine these things. Another great way, especially for you guys, because we're kind of again approaching this from like a chapter and a service perspective, is having open conversations in your chapter, doing group reflections and discussions about this. If there's a particular community and culture that you're that you work with regularly, or that you know you have a project coming up that you're going to work with this, like set aside some time during a chapter meeting one night to kind of do this group reflection and just sort of ask people, see if you have anyone, you know, with prior experience or from that community and that culture in your chapter, and ask them. Of course, we don't want to put, you know, the burden on them, and we don't want to just be like, okay, tell us everything we have to do. We have to take that upon ourselves as well. So you have to be careful with that too. But having reflection and discussion as a group can be a really great thing to do, because some people will say things that maybe you hadn't thought of, but applies to you, and you're like, oh, you know, I feel the same way, or you're right, I have that same bias, if I'm being honest, or oh my gosh, I do come from that same level of privilege in this particular situation, and I wouldn't have thought of that. So I'm glad that you said it. And then it also just works as a nice bonding experience as a group also. And there's lots more methods, of course, these are, and questions that you can ask. These are just the bare minimum. So, how do we engage with these diverse communities? We've talked about kind of what we don't want to do and how we examine ourselves. So now comes the time to actually engage with these communities. So listening is going to always be the most critical first step. We don't want to impose what we think is best, kind of like we've already mentioned. We need to ask and we need to listen to what the community needs and how we can best support them. And sometimes that means we have to pivot. Maybe we had this idea to do one thing with this particular project, and either leading up to in talking with, you know, the community coordinators, or even in the moment during the project, we get feedback and we realize, okay, what we're doing or what we had planned to do is not what they need. And sometimes the pivot's not possible in that moment. If that's the case, I think it's going to be really important to communicate that to, you know, the coordinators or the community, and say, we do hear you, and, you know, okay, if we were to pivot this way, would this work, or would this better serve you? And if they're like, yes, absolutely, then you could say, okay, well, you know, just given this situation, we can't do that right now or today, but we have heard what you say, and we will definitely take that into consideration the next time that we work together, so that we can make sure that we're serving you in the best way possible. And so that not only lets them know that you are actually listening to what they're saying, you're hearing what they're saying, but that you've taken that to heart, because you've already started thinking about ways that you can meet them where they need to be met. And then you've already kind of laid the groundwork, hopefully, to do more work with them in the future, because you're saying, we want to come back. We want to do the things that you need to serve you. While we can't do it today, we can promise you that we've heard this, and the next time we come back, we're going to do better. And that's going to build that trust that we talked about before. And that's going to make them want to invite you back. Or next time you say, hey, we'd love to work with you guys again, they're going to be like, yeah, we'd absolutely love that. Also, building relationships that are rooted in respect is going to allow you to lead more effective service projects. So exactly like I just said, and asking them for their input and needs. These are all just bullet points that are reiterating what I've already said. Everything hinges on respect and listening and hearing what's being said. Some of the best practices for leading culturally aware service projects. In order to lead with cultural humility, your chapter needs to create a space for open discussions about bias and privilege, like we mentioned before, whether that be those group, can't think of the word, I'm losing the word in the moment, but those group sessions where you're like talking about it and doing it, or if you're just making sure to let anyone know that if they, you know, feel a certain way about things that are happening in the chapter, that they can talk about it, or if they're doing some of that personal reflection and something comes out, you know, comes up during that they have a safe space somewhere within the chapter where they can like talk that out, talk with somebody, get some feedback, things like that. Also, building genuine partnerships with community leaders. This this is twofold. So this again goes back to, like I've said before, where you're building that trust within those projects that you're doing. That's going to lead to building the partnership, but also working with community leaders. So actually seeking them out. Find people who, if you're working with a specific population and community, see if you have leaders on your campus or in your town or wherever who, they focus on working with those communities, or they're from those communities and they're working to, better them or do whatever, and reach out to those people. Like, don't be afraid to sort of make the first contact. The worst that's going to happen is they'll say like, oh, I don't have time, or you'll never hear back from them. And then you just move on. But the best case that can happen is they'd say, yes, I'd love to meet with you and talk with you. And a lot of times in doing that, that can even open the door for you and your chapter to have other projects and things that you can work on. And ultimately, that's why we're all here. We're here for service. And while it's great to do, one random project for one random cause or community or group, obviously the best thing that can happen long term is when we're building those relationships and we're continuing to help it, and it's not just kind of a one-off situation. Offering ongoing training. So, this is great, of course, but it's always going to be different, coming from me as someone like at headquarters, just kind of preaching to you guys versus you doing things within your chapter. And then again, you also get that bonding experience with each other. So, checking in every once in a while and say, hey, when's the last time we did some sort of, like cultural humility training within our chapter? And if it's been a little while, then maybe figure out something that you can do to offer that training. Not only just to make sure that you're kind of staying up on it and keeping it at the forefront of your mind in all of you and your members, but also because obviously you're having membership turnover, right? And so if you do a cultural humility training today in your chapter, and then you don't do another one for 3+ semesters, you could have a completely new chapter where no one who was at that first cultural humility training is now in your chapter. And so that's another reason to make sure that you're checking in for any training, but in this case specifically, your cultural humility training, you're kind of checking in and making sure that you're continuing to do that. And then it's also essential to regularly evaluate your service projects with a cultural humility lens. So, which you guys really should be doing kind of service project evaluations, if not for every project, then kind of intermittently, just sort of picking ones and doing an evaluation on it, sort of say, okay, what went well with this? What didn't? What can we do better, next time? And in that, make sure that part of that evaluation is looking at it through that cultural humility lens and saying, okay, did we come in with any biases and privileges? Did we take over and not listen to the community? Or did we hear them and take their feedback and either implement it in the moment or come up with a plan to implement it in the future? So, overcoming some challenges, because inherently there's always going to be challenges that arise, whether they are unconscious assumptions or power imbalances or whatever. So, the best way to handle these is, surprise, surprise, with humility. You have to be open to feedback. You have to foster transparent communication. Um, you have to share power with the communities and that you're serving, and this is what helps to ensure that these projects meet their actual needs. So on the slide here you see like some common challenges and assumptions, or common challenges, which are assumption and stereotypes. So those are those biases that we could potentially come in with, the power dynamics and the imbalance of power that can happen, and then navigating any potential misunderstandings that may arise, and doing that again with humility. Sometimes we can get defensive, and again, we often don't intend to, right? Like nobody's coming in, they're just like, I'm not listening to anything today and I'm always right. Hopefully none of you are doing that, at least. So just, taking that moment to sort of breathe, take a step back and be humble about it. Okay, So I want to take a minute and I want to kind of involve you guys in this a little bit and do like a little bit of a group reflection. Please don't be shy. This is a safe space. There's no dumb opinions, questions, whatever here. But I want you guys to think about a recent service project that you've done. It could be one you've done individually, it could be one you've done as your chapter. And think if there is a way that you could have applied cultural humility to improve that project. So I'd love it if anyone has like an example and is willing to brave the group and share that with us. That's kind of the whole point of this slide. So take a second, think about some of the um, projects that you've done in the past. And anyone let me know. Yes, no, maybe. I think I'm having some screen sharing issues again. So while we're here waiting. Nobody's gonna brave it.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, so we actually just had an exec meeting for our Alpha Phi chapter about this because we're planning for we're gonna do a gender affirming clothing drive for the diversity pillar. So we
Wonderful.
actually
I love it.
topic about this kind of not so much how well you worded it, but definitely we were like thinking about ways we could do it better.
Great. Do you have some examples of like things that maybe came up as like, oh, this could be a potential issue and or what the better ways that you came up with for that were?
I feel like just the way we were gonna do it, originally we were thinking of doing like a tabling thing where like it would be like a free thrift, like we're gonna collect from like a bunch of different orgs on campus, and then we're gonna do like a thrift, but then we thought that maybe like other people might take advantage of it, that like or people would be like too like we just didn't know how to make it so like welcoming to others because we don't know what situation others are in that like they would be willing, especially if they don't know us. So we
Mm-hmm.
actually have a center on Binghamton's campus that's the Hugh Center. So we thought that instead of like actually like tabling for it, we can collect clothes and then make like a little goodie bag, like we have a whole thing planned and then we're gonna give it to the Q Center and then they're gonna distribute it. So like at least it's more of a source where people feel comfortable with.
Yeah, wonderful. I love that. That's a great example. And that's a good example of it wasn't necessarily biases, right? Or even privilege that was affecting it. You were just more concerned with okay,
Yeah.
what if what we're doing other people take advantage of, so thus it's taking away from the community that we're actually
Yeah.
directly trying to serve, or they're not feeling, safe enough to come to the table. And so you came up with a great idea and plan of like how you can sort of circumvent that. And then of course, if you wanted to even take that a step further after the project, if there's a way to do this, if there's a way to either like talk with the people at the center or have like a survey, you could even have the survey like ready to go and have a QR code or whatever that anyone who came in could like anonymously participate in the survey. And then you could
Yeah.
maybe get some feedback of like, hey, how do you feel this went? Did you feel safe coming in and taking it? Was it beneficial for you? Are there things we could do better in the future? And that just even opens it up further for feedback. So awesome. Thank you for
Thank
sharing
you.
that. Anybody else have anything they want to share? Or questions about, I mean, since we're here and we're actually like almost done with the slides themselves. So if there's like, I do have a, like spot at the end for questions and comments, but if you have like specific questions up to this point that you have, I'm trying to share my screen again over here. Okay. Well, I'm gonna move on since you guys are not chatty Cathy's tonight, which is fine. Okay, so let me share this. Oh, hold on. don't know why it keeps trying to pause. I keep saying it's paused on my end too, so. Ugh. Okay, we might just have to do it this way. It won't be as pretty, but it will work. Okay, let's just try it this way. Okay, so conclusion. So steps moving forward. What are some of the steps moving forward? So as we kind of start to wrap this up, remember that again, this is an ongoing process. And so you're going to take some of these principles, hopefully, back to your chapter, and you're going to integrate them into your service planning. And it's that commitment to learning and growth and respectful relationships that hopefully is going to ensure that your projects are actually uplifting the community members that you're working for and working with, and that it's actually benefiting them. So again, the next steps is incorporating this into your planning. So from the very beginning, ideally, is when we start this, is when we're planning a service project, we're already thinking about these things. We're doing these self-assessments, we're doing these chapter assessments and project assessments, and sort of saying, okay, let's look at what we've planned or what we think we're thinking about planning, and let's take a step back sort of and look at the big picture and question, is there something we're doing that could be improved, that is being influenced by biases, privileges, stereotypes, etc.? And then if you find something, what can we do to try and change that? Committing again to that self-learning and that self-reflection, or continuous learning and self-reflection. And by the continuous learning, that comes from that listening and that hearing, right? Being open to feedback from others. And from that comes the last bullet point, which is building those strong, respectful relationships with the communities that you serve. So that's actually it for the actual presentation tonight. I'm kind of a fast talker, so we went through it pretty quickly. So now is when I will actually say, does anybody have questions, reflections, anything that they want to know? Things that I didn't cover that you want to touch on, etc. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
For sorry, my camera is actually horrible, so I'm not gonna turn it on.
That's okay.
Is this so I know you mentioned like bring these ideas back to the chapter. My chapter has never like consistently brought notes from like LOA meetings or OLA, whatever I said, from these meetings like back to exec. Is that something that we like should be doing? Because I would love to share all of this stuff with exec, and I think I should, but I just don't know if that's something that we should be like consistently implementing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's just going to depend on each person who attends the different sessions, you know, how engaged they actually are to it, if they're just sort of coming to check the box off, or if they're actually listening and taking the notes. Also though, like for you specifically, if you're like, hey, I really want to take this information back to the chapter, shoot me an email, because I can download this presentation as a PDF, and then I can email you the PDF, and then you have the slides. And then you can take at least the information that's on the slides, and then anything that comes from your memory, and you can either just present it as it is, and by present, you know, you can get up and do a presentation, or you can just say, hey, here's this, you know, PDF for everybody to just kind of look through and read through. But you can also take it and expand on it if you want to do a cultural humility training in your chapter. You can present it as is, or you can dig a little deeper, do a little bit more research, take it even further, and do that from there. So that's another option that I'm happy to do for anyone who wants it, is just shoot me an email and say, hey, can you send me the presentation, the serving with cultural humility presentation, so that I have it, and I'll gladly do that as well.
Okay,
But
I will
ideally,
probably email you then.
Okay, yeah. But ideally, yes, I would love if every time, you or somebody from your chapter attends one of these OLA sessions, that the idea is that a representative is attending in order to sort of pass this information on in some way or another, whether that be you're just taking some notes, maybe at your next meeting, you have like a moment where you kind of give a debrief of the most recent OLA session and like, hey, here's the top highlight points of what we learned. Or you can take it more in depth like that too. So yeah, just shoot me an email. Anything else? Okay, so the last step of this is I'm going to post in the chat here in a second, as soon as I get all of this. All of my windows together. Okay, I'm going to post a link here in the chat. This link is for your survey. So if you could please take that, you'll probably get an email as well from the chapter health team, somebody on the chapter health team. And they might send the same link, but I'm just going to give it to you here. And now if you could take that link, it's just going to ask you for some very basic feedback on this presentation. Please do be honest. Also, though, give me a little bit of grace. I did just step into this role and get notified I was teaching this like maybe a week ago. But please be honest, let us know, because we want these to be beneficial for you guys. So if you're coming to them and the information that we're providing is not beneficial, we do want to know that. Now, obviously, ideally, if you're going to say it wasn't beneficial, I didn't learn anything, please then let us know what you think would have made it more beneficial for you, or what things we could have covered that you would have like felt like you took something away from it, so that we can alter these in the future so that we're providing you guys with what you really need, because that is ultimately our goal, is to be here to support you guys and make sure that you and your chapters are wildly successful. So if there are no other questions, comments, concerns, then that's all that I have for you guys tonight. I appreciate you taking the time to come and listen to me babble on. And if ever you have specific questions for me, feel free to reach out, shoot me an email. If it's a general like chapter issue, obviously go through your chapter health team representatives first. They're kind of your chain of command. But if you do need something from me directly, I'm always here to help. So thank you guys. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening and rest of your week.
I'm gonna
Night.
stick around for a second. I'm trying to get this to work.
Yeah, feel free to hang out here.
Um,
I have to finish taking roll anyway, so making sure it all gets copied over.
yeah, it's just not working for me. Like I'm trying to sign into Slack and
Oh,
it's
link's not working?
letting me.
Okay.
Like
let
it prompted me to sign into Slack, but my browser isn't letting me sign into Slack. So I'm gonna try and like copy and paste it.
Okay, let me
Browser.
see if I can get the direct link. Let me see here. Okay, here, try this link instead. All right, try that link instead and see if that works. That's the direct link, so hopefully.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Did that work for you?
Yeah, I don't know why I'm having
Okay.
so many like technical things.
Listen, clearly I was having them all evening, and I haven't had any all day with all my other meetings, and tonight it's like just we're done for the day, so it's fine.
Well, thank you. I will probably send you an email like at some point tonight for the
Yeah.
slides, because I would love to share it with my chapter as like a diversity presentation thing.
Wonderful. I would love that. I will happily send it when I get that email through. So,
Thank you.
all right. Thank you. Have a good night. Bye-bye.